They had me fooled in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. In retrospect, I should have known that they were not going to introduce that kind of drama into this show, as it so expertly avoided that up until now. This week's episode is finally focusing on Akebi. We've had so many episodes focusing on the other characters that I was starting to get worried if we were even going to come back to Akebi herself. The first shot we see is of some sort of swimming competition between Akebi and one of her classmates, Minakami. Akebi herself actually looks angry, and since all of her classmates are around the pool watching them, the implication is that something big happened. It turns out that this scene is a flash forward, and after the intro, we are brought back to the classroom where Akebi and her classmates are discussing their rankings from the midterms. This concept has always been interesting for me because I grew up in the American school system. Now, I haven't been in school in a very long time, but in my schools we never had any concept of a ranking system. I guess the only thing that we had that was made public would be whoever was the valedictorian or the top seat. So everyone would know who is the top scorer in this class, but there was never this competitive atmosphere of who would be ranked above the others. I've always wondered if I would have been more motivated in school if I knew I had a rank, because I can get fairly competitive sometimes. I do understand the possible worry though, as many other anime have showcased how exclusion can happen based on this type of ranking, and it could definitely cause an unwarranted amount of stress on students. I had remarked in one of my previous videos about how it looked like Akebi was homeschooled, which would make sense considering her remote home location. It's obvious that that has not affected Akebi at all, as she was ranked 5th in their tests for the entire grade. As all of the classmates are sitting around the classroom and talking about how they did, Erika notes how it is Akebi's first experience with ranked testing. The scene then shifts when Tatsumori enters the classroom, as it looks like it's coming up to the time of their athletic festival. I was wondering when we would get something like this, because it's not a true slice of life show until we get some sort of festival. Personally, I was kind of expecting a cultural festival, which we could still very possibly get, but for now, it's the sports fest. Tatsumori is fired up, and the group needs to figure out who will be competing in which events. As they go through each event, they eventually get to the last one, which is the swimming event. It's here we get introduced to the main antagonist of this episode, which is Minakami. It looks like the swimming event is a relay race, and since Minakami is a member of the swim club, it seems pretty obvious that she will be the anchor, since that's usually the spot reserved for your fastest swimmer. But it's at this point that Erika kind of stirs the pot and talks about how Akebi is a really fast swimmer herself, especially when swimming in the freestyle. Tatsumori gets all up in arms, and Akebi herself is flustered because she's only ever swam for fun or recreationally. One thing leads to another, and it's decided that they will have a competition to see which one is faster to determine who will swim the anchor leg in the athletic festival. The stakes are made extra high due to the scene after the class where Akebi is her usual positive self, and Minakami basically starts provoking her, bragging about how she's been to the nationals before, and then forcing Akebi into a bet where if she loses, she will lose her precious sailor uniform. I don't know about you, but this scene did a great job of getting me to dislike Minakami. At the very least, it makes me uncomfortable because it's the first time they've shown someone with such an outright prickly and antagonistic disposition. I think they used Tatsumori here to essentially be like a proxy for the viewer, because she echoes a lot of the thoughts that I had at the time in the short staircase scene that we get afterwards between her and Minakami. When you look back at the scene after finishing the episode, however, I think it does a pretty good job of showing Minakami's true feeling, after she says the line, "Having a bet going on makes the contest more fun, right?" It makes sense as she is in a sports club, and I think it goes to what I mentioned earlier, which is that she obviously has a competitive drive, which is something I don't think any of the other girls have really showcased to this point. We cut to Akebi with her mom, and she is taking Akebi's measurements so that she can make her summer uniform. I had completely forgotten that this was a thing, because the uniform she was already wearing has kind of a summer vibe to it, but I think this is a good indicator of time passing. Up until now, because of the episodic nature of the show, I actually think it's been pretty difficult to gauge how long Akebi has been at the school, so I think this was kind of perfect timing to introduce an episode like this, so we can get a sense of progression due to things like the midterms and the changing of the uniform. After dealing with her mother's teasing, it's obvious that Akebi is determined to try her best and not lose her uniform. and this becomes apparent to Minakami as well when she sees Akebi getting ready for their race. We finally come full circle back to the first scene as they both dive into the water. I was worried here that they were going to do that anime thing where determination is enough to let a complete amateur win against an accomplished athlete. While I do think they stretched the limits of believability just a little bit, the outcome was still pretty much as expected. To be fair, they have depicted Akebi as really athletic since literally the first scene of the show. She runs to school every day, which is who knows how many miles. She's almost like an accomplished gymnast as she can do crazy back handsprings and is incredibly flexible. Like, I'm fairly sure in another timeline we get an Akebi series where she's the main character of a sports story and is the overpowered main character because she is naturally gifted and trains like a pro without even realizing it. Actually, why doesn't that exist? Free, but for Yuri fans. At any rate, I like that they included the little details like how Akebi turns at the wall as you would expect an amateur to do, and it ends up being the reason that she loses the race. Akebi is obviously upset about losing and having to give up her uniform, but it's here that we get the true reveal from Minakami. She says she was not serious about the bet and was just looking to get Akebi fired up so she would take the race seriously, which was obviously successful. I think the theme of this part of the show is really to showcase that sometimes determination is not enough to get what you want, but sometimes that's not what's needed. In this instance, Akebi's determination is what is going to fuel the rest of the classmates to do their best for the athletics festival, kind of getting everybody fired up. That is, of course, if Minakami can get her grades up enough to participate. We also get the reveal here of the side bet she ended up placing with Tatsumori in the stairwell. Since she won, Tatsumori will have to help her study. I'm actually kind of worried about Minakami here, thinking maybe she's going to have some sort of gambling addiction in the future, the way she's making all these bets, but I think that's beside the point. We get a nice montage of their study session, and I wanted to point out here that I really enjoy the music choices and soundtrack for this series. I think we rightfully are admiring the fantastic animation, but a lot of the time they have a great choice of musical accompaniment that really kind of brings these scenes to life. The last part of this episode focuses on Akebi's new summer uniform. Just like with the first uniform, Akebi is impatiently waiting for her mother to finish it up before she can try it on. Last time, her dad was not around, so she did not have the chance to show off her uniform to him. But this time, it looks like he's specifically made time so he can see his daughter off while she's wearing her new uniform. It's honestly a really heartwarming and very wholesome scene. This week, we also got a little special after-credits scene with Akebi and her sister. And it looks like her sister might be as enamored with the sailor uniform as Akebi is. She tries on her sister's uniform, but it is obviously too big for her. Akebi ends up consoling her by telling her that once she grows up, it should fit right, and then she'll look really cool. Seriously, the level of sweetness in this show is going to give me diabetes. At any rate, I definitely enjoyed this week's episode, and I'm glad we finally got back to an Akebi-focused episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.